In this video, we're going to be creating a new widget that will handle displaying a simple game over screen. It'll also allow us to restart or quit the current game, and it's going to show us how many points we scored in our last playthrough. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's close down anything we had open, and let's save just to be safe. So, game over screen, well, it seems like the most obvious part to start with is the game over screen itself. So let's go to UI. Let's create a new user interface widget, and we'll call it game over screen. Let's try to call it game over screen. There we go. And we will go ahead and open it up, and we will set this up to match what we want. So game over screen, and we will lay this out. So the simplest thing is, let's drag in some text, and we'll call this game over. And we'll try to call this game over. There we go. And let's center it, dead center. We reset our positions, size to content, and we go ahead and set our alignment to 0.5, 0.5, so it's dead in the middle. Let's increase our size a bit. Let's go 72, that sounds good. Now, let's make it a little off center, so we'll move the position Y, and we'll adjust that till it goes up, let's say right about there. We'll round this to a -100, and that looks good enough to me. That means no matter what size the screen is, it's going to be offset by 100 from the middle center. Let's add in a place for a score. Now we know earlier what we're going to need because we created this before. Let's add in text, and let's immediately wrap this in a horizontal block just because we can. We know we're going to need 2 earlier based on what we did. And we'll add another text block. There we go. Now we may have an issue here. You notice how you can't see anything? Well, we haven't set up our horizontal block. Size it to the content, and now we're good to go. Let's anchor this one back to the middle, and let's make it right in the middle. Put it right below our game over text, and actually do these properly. 0.5, 0.5, no position X, no position Y, and boom, dead in the center. Let's make our text itself. Let's go with 32. And we'll make our score 32. You know what? Let's make it a little more. Let's make our score stand out a little bit. We'll make it 38. We'll set our left alignment and our center alignment. And then on this one, we'll set a right alignment and a center alignment. And it gives it a little bit of a look. Let's name this score like that. And then let's go ahead and toss in a bunch of 9s for fun. Or 9099, why not? There we go. We got a little bit of a look going on. So that is our basic game over screen. It's going to pop up when we're done and show game over and then give us our score. So how are we actually going to get our game over screen? We're going to need to somehow know when we are done shooting all of our targets. Now, our game mode is a good place to do things that keep track of how the game mode is going, how our game is going. You could make a manager called Game Manager, or you could put this in your player, or you could have a target manager. A target manager might actually be smarter, and you'll see why later. But for now, we're just going to use the game mode. Keep in mind, any of these things will work. It's just how you want to structure your game and build it out. For our example, we're going to use the game mode because we have one already and it's easy to use. So let's go to our game mode and open it up. Since we don't have any code, we need to open the full blueprint editor and we will start working. And let's delete the tick and the begin play because why not? So we need a way to keep track of our targets. So let's set up a variable called targets remaining. And this will be an integer because we have an even number of targets. And if we have half of a target, that is just extremely weird. So targets remaining and a default of 0. We need our targets to register with our game mode and to basically deregister with our game mode whenever they die. So we're going to need an add target event and a remove target event. Hopefully you'll know that I'm going to be using a blueprint interface because they just make life so much simpler. We don't have to know that this is an FP game mode. We can just call the game mode. Let's go back to our map, let's go back into our game mode and let's add a interface because I can't do it right. There we go, blueprint interface. Yes, game mode BPI. And open it up. So let's see, we are going to need a function for adding target, and we're going to need a function for remove target, and that is all we're going to use for now. We basically want to somehow add and remove targets to our target list. Seems pretty simple. Now if we had a target manager, we wouldn't even need this. The target manager would spawn the targets, and the target manager would keep track of the targets, and then whenever the targets died, the target manager would be notified and could automatically handle itself. So that's a reason why a target manager may have been a good idea. Let's go back into our game mode and let's implement our new interface events. So we'll add, let's see, we had add target, and of course it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Well, we skipped a step. Class settings, no interfaces. Let's go ahead and add our game mode blueprint interface and compile. And now we have the event add target. And conveniently, while we're here, why don't we add the remove target? And there we go. Now we have the add and remove target events. Let's go ahead and set these up, and these should be pretty simple. Basically, the add target event, when it's called, it's going to simply increment our targets remaining. So target, add an integer to it. Oh, it's conveniently 1. And then set targets remaining. And that's it. All we're going to do here is increment our targets remaining value by 1 every time we add a target. And the remove one should be pretty simple. Let's actually, why not we copy paste, hook this up, remove our subtraction, our addition. Let's put a subtraction in there and do it like that. And there we go. So now we're keeping track of our targets. We're adding and removing targets depending on if they are added or destroyed. Now we're not actually going to do anything with this yet. We're going to test it first. So in order to test it, we need our targets to add or remove themselves. Now we've already set up events properly that hopefully this shouldn't be an issue. Let's find our targets. They should be in here somewhere. Target blueprint, and we have a begin play. We are health, material, color. Well, this should be easy enough. Add target message, and let's go ahead and save it, and it will fail. Of course it'll fail because we don't know what we're calling add target on. It wants to be called on the game mode blueprint interface, and the nice thing is a game mode is a universal object. We can just right click, get game mode, and we're done. We don't have to worry about it. Game modes will always exist because it's one of your default objects. And by doing this, we've gone ahead and added our target. Let's actually see this in use. Let's go to here. We will put a break so that way we can see it called, and we'll run. And we notice it's immediately going to stop. Right now, we have one target being added to our targets remaining. Our current value is 0 because we haven't run this yet. We'll resume it. Target remaining 1. Resume it. This is the third time we've called it. Keep in mind. So at this point in time, we are adding one more, and this is setting our third target. We resume it. Targets remaining 3, and then targets remaining 4. So now we have 4 targets registered with our game mode. Next thing we want to do is deregister them with the game mode. Now this should be pretty simple. What are we doing when we are done with them? We are destroying them. So if we go over here and we destroy actor, and we grab our game mode and copy it so we can be lazy, and then we remove, and we put this in here and hook this up to the destroy, and we do that, and there we go. Now what we're going to do after we update the score, after we make sure there's none left, we go ahead and remove the target by letting the game mode know, and then we destroy the actor. Let's go ahead and watch this in motion. We'll do remove target, and we'll hit play. Now it should run normally. We will fire at this target twice. The event gets called. We currently have 4 targets remaining, and we are subtracting 1. We'll resume. Now if we destroy this one, we currently have 3 targets remaining, and we're destroying 1. So that would continue all the way down until we had 0 targets remaining. Let's unset the blueprint. And now we have the targets talking to our game mode and registering or deregistering themselves. That seems simple enough. So what do we do next? Well, let's see. We have our targets, and inside of our game mode, they are being talked to. So we need to now somehow call our game over event. So let's make a new event called handle game over. Sorry, not an event. Let's make a new function called handle game over. Game over. And we are going to go ahead and we will, 1 second, save, there we go. And I actually did mean an event, not a function. You know what, we'll just keep it a function, why not? That's not really a big deal. We'll call it a function, that way it's easily callable. So we'll call it handle game over. Or do we want, how do we want to do this? We'll call it handle game over. We'll call it a function and we'll keep it like that. Okay. So what's handle game over going to do? Handle game over is basically going to show the game over screen and then allow the player to quit or restart. We haven't hooked up that functionality yet, but we'll take care of it now. So this should be pretty simple. We know that we need to create a widget called game over, and we know we need to add it to our viewport. Now, we don't really need to save a reference to the game over screen because we're not going to be reusing it. We're just either going to be quitting out, which ends the game, or restarting, which will reload the level. So we don't really need to do anything with the widget. So we just have handle game over here. When do we call handle game over? Well, when we have no more targets. So every time we remove a target, let's go ahead and check and see if we have any more targets left. This should be pretty simple. We'll do an if, and our condition will be if we have less than or equal to 0 targets. Remember our conversation earlier? Always try to use less than or equal when you're comparing to 0 if you want to make sure something's dead or has been depleted, or you may run into issues. So there we go. So now on this condition branch, after we remove a target, we see if we have 0 or less targets remaining. If we do, well, handle game over. And we'll go ahead and run this. Now it's not going to run right, but that's the whole point. Make sure it works and then iterate over it and make it work better. Let's run through our targets. I should probably adjust that 10 one right here so it doesn't take so long. And there we go, game over. So our screen is being displayed. We just need to fix some of the issues here. The game over screen kind of doesn't really look very good. We can see everything still going on, and we can actually still move. So we're going to need to take control away from the player, and we're going to need to hide the normal user interface. Well, that's pretty simple. If we go into our game over screen, we can actually add a background image that will cover everything up. So we'll go here. Let's move it up just because it looks better. We'll rename it to background. And we're going to stretch this. We'll use the anchor for everything. We'll reset everything to zeros or the defaults. And we need to change our offsets to zeros as well. And now we're covering everything. Z order is the order in which it's displayed. 0 is our default. Negative are behind. Positives are above. Let's set this to -10. And it's now going to go behind everything. And we'll set it to a nice black color. And now you notice we have a black screen covering up everything. If we go back into our map and we adjust our values down to 1 to make this a little bit quicker. I will leave this one at 2 just because. And we hit play. We should be able to fire twice. And there's our game over screen. We're covering everything. Now you can't really see it, but I can still move. So we're going to have to fix that. Inside of our game mode for handling game over, what we're going to want to do is restrict the player from moving. And there are functions and nodes to handle that. In the player controller, since we're using a player controller, since we're using a character and we have all these nice things given to us, we have the ability to set the input mode and to set the mouse cursor. So let's get our player controller, and that is important. If we were to go input mode, we're going to see these things right here. Set input mode UI only, set input mode game only, and set input mode game only. And they're going to pull out, but you're not going to know what to hook up to it. The easiest thing to do is get your player controller, type in input mode, and you're going to go ahead and get your events already rewired and hooked up. Now the differences between these are small but pretty significant. Game and UI, well, first of all, game only. This is our default. This is where the input goes to our player controller or our player. It goes to whatever our first input source is. There's no user interface interaction allowed, and you don't see your mouse. The mouse doesn't interact as a cursor. UI only is the opposite. This is going to show us our mouse cursor only. Any player input will be swallowed up by the user interface itself, and you're no longer going to be able to control your character. You're just going to have interface actions on your UI. Game and UI is a combination of both. Basically, the UI takes input, but if the UI doesn't handle it, it's passed along to the player controller and the player input. So this is a hybrid where you can move, but you still have the ability to use your mouse to click on things and interact with user interface elements. For our purposes, we're going to concentrate on game and UI. So let's set it to UI only and hook it up. And then let's go ahead and show the mouse cursor. Because we are going to be allowing the player to click on buttons to quit and restart, we want to make sure they can actually click on them. So our input mode is UI only. We don't need to focus on a widget. By default, it's going to focus on whatever's displayed. We're not going to lock the mouse to the viewport. Then in our show mouse cursor, we're going to make sure we check the Boolean so we can actually see our mouse cursor. Run through it again. Run through the playthrough. Now I can't move with my arrows, and I have a mouse cursor that'll allow me to click on our screen and actually resize my interface as well. So we'll go ahead and stop that, and now we'll move on to the next part. We are going to need to add in quit and restart buttons. But before we do that, why don't we go ahead and fix the bug with the fact that we can't actually see our score. Technically, I should rephrase that. If we run through this, we can see a score, but it's not accurate. We want our real score. So where is our real score? Our real score is in our controller. So we need a way for our HUD to show the real score. Now we can either have during the game over event, have it push to the HUD, or we could have the HUD itself when it's created, talk to the controller and get the score. Now, we know the score is in the controller, and we know a controller is always going to exist. And even if it didn't exist, we want to fail gracefully. So why don't we do that? We're going to create a new entry in our blueprint interface on our controller for getting the score. And you know what? If for whatever reason we don't have a controller, it's simply going to fail gracefully, but we're going to not have a failure issue. That's the key. It may display 90999, but at least it's not going to fail. So in our character controller blueprint, we're going to open this up, and we're going to add a new function called getScore. This is going to be pretty simple. It's going to give us the score. So we're going to use an output. We'll do an output of value, and we're going to, actually, you know what? Why don't we just call this score, because score is a little more appropriate. Because it's going to output a score. And we'll call this an integer. And there we go. If we go back to our controller itself, let's compile to get the new one. And now we'll have a new event called getScore. And this one is really simple. If we type in getScore, we have the, that didn't work. Hold on a second. There we go. Interface getScore. That is one of those issues you're going to run into that you have to pay attention to. When you have we have the handle update score up there, for example, update score. It's an event. If you have an output node, it turns it into an interface function right here. Because there's an output, it cannot be inside your main event graph. So that's something to pay attention to. So if I was to type in get score, you're not going to see add event. You're going to have the call function get score, or you're going to have the get score interface call, but none of them are going to be right. You can't add that event, and it's frustrating the first time you run into it. It's going to be over here in the interface section because it's special, because it has a return node, and things inside your main event graph can't return anything because they're not actually running anything. It's not going to be there. So keep that in mind. When you have an interface with an output, it's going to have its own section in your detail panel. And there we go, get score. Hopefully this should be easy to figure out. Boom, that's it. That's all we need to do for get score. Now we need to hook up our game over screen, if we can find it. It's in here somewhere. Here we go, game over screen. And this should be pretty simple. When we construct our game over screen, we are going to get the controller. So we'll get the player controller. And we are going to call what? Well, we're going to call get score. This is going to return back to us a integer score. If we go into here, we go to our score value. We make it a variable. We'll call this the score text block again. We'll go back to our graph. Drag it off, get it, set the text on it. This is all the stuff, same stuff we did before for our heads-up display. We're simply doing here. Take our score, plug it into here, move things around a little bit, like this, make things a little prettier, and move it over a little more. There we go. And that should be it. Now, whenever we construct this event, we are talking to the player controller. We're saying, hey, give me the score. It's either going to fail or it's not going to fail. If it fails, then no harm, no foul. If it's successful, we convert that into a text and we display it on the screen. Let's go ahead and check it out. We have a score of 500, 550, and 800. There we go. Game over, score of 800. Couple more things to do. We need a quit and restart button. We're kind of stuck. So, should be really simple. Go to the designer. We know we're going to do a quit and we know we're going to do a restart button. So let's go ahead and let's do a panel and we'll do a vertical box right here. And we'll put in a button right there. And we'll put in another button down, drag it down here. Each of these buttons should have text on them. And like that, we'll take our vertical box, make sure it sizes to the content. Let's set this up in the middle again. Let's reset everything back to that. Let's set it offset from the center of our buttons. Actually, you know what? Let's set it over and let's set it at the top. That way it's offset from the top. And we'll go ahead and move our position Y like that. Let's go with 100 as well, so like we did game over. Whoop, that's 1,000. And there we go. Now it's always going to be offset from the middle, even if our screen changes. Let's go in here. Let's make restart game our first. Okay, let's try this again. Restart game. And this is quit game. That way we'll at least know which text is which. Let's go. Actually, we're going to need to name our buttons too. So let's call this restart button because we're going to need to drag stuff off of them. Quit button. And clean things up a little bit. Okay, now we'll go in here in our text. We'll name this restart game. And we'll name this one, we'll call this one give up. Why not? There we go. We have restart game and we have give up. Let's hook some simple events up to them and let's make them work. We'll start with give up. That's the simplest one. On quit button, we have our events down here. We're going to go ahead and add an on clicked event. When we click on the quit button, what do we want to do? Well, quit. That's it. There's a node simply to quit, and it's simply going to quit. Our next one is our restart button. Well, this one is restart, on clicked, and this one is pretty simple. We're going to simply open up the level that we've been playing, and it will basically restart. when you open the map, all of your transient variable, all of your variables, all of your settings that are not saved will disappear. Your game modes reset, your players reset, your characters reset, your controllers are reset. Pretty much everything that's not in the persistent level or inside of a game instance is reset. And we can use that to our advantage. So we'll go ahead and just load level. Map. Man, this happens every time. Let's see. Open level. There we go. And we'll put in our level name. So we'll go in here. Maps. FPS-map. Now, one thing to note, this is a name variable. So FPS-map in all lowercase is going to be the same as FPS-map in uppercase and also this correct case here. Name variables are case sensitive or case insensitive. Okay, let's run this. Always test after you do something so you can fix what you break. We have a restart and give up. Let's hit give up. We're back in our editor. We'll go ahead and play again. Fire, 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 fire. And we'll restart the game. And we're back to the start. Now we have a small issue. I cannot move my character anymore. I had mouse support, but I no longer can move my character. I can't move him at all. And actually if you're stuck right here, if you've clicked and you no longer can move and your mouse won't move away from your screen, Shift F1 will unlock the cursor, but it doesn't work every time. Simply Alt Tab out, and then you'll get your cursor back. Make sure you stop and come back into the game. So keep that in mind. If you get stuck at this point in time by restarting and you no longer have mouse support because you clicked, even though it says Shift F1 for mouse cursor, it won't give it up sometimes. Alt and Tab to tab out, and then you can go ahead and stop. So we need to fix that. Hopefully you know how we caused it. When I talked about it earlier, in terms of our player controller, we were disabling the player's input. We were setting it to UI only, and we were doing that somewhere in here. I think it was in the game mode. Let's see. Yep, right here. Set input mode UI only and show mouse cursor. And that was under handle game over. So we need a way to handle getting the mouse, disabling the mouse and setting it to game mode only. And how would we do that? Well, since we have a handle game over, let's be cheeky about it. Let's do a handle game start. And we'll simply call this whenever the game is started, and we'll give control to the player appropriately. Now, one nice thing about this, setting the input mode to what it already is set at isn't really going to cause any issues. So we're going to want the opposite of what we did before. So we'll get our player controller. We're going to set input mode to game only. And then we are also going to set the mouse cursor to hide. So show mouse. And unchecked means we will not show the mouse cursor. And we'll go ahead and just clean this up a little bit. And clean any non-straight lines. There we go. So now we have a handle game start. So the handle game start itself, where might be the appropriate place to put that? If you have a traditional workflow, I mean, keep in mind this is a prototype, this is a basis. It's meant to just get something going so you can get something going. You might want to put this in like an initialization on you might have an initial game start where your game mode spawns a player and spawns targets, and your game mode controls the flow and execution of your start. And as part of that, you're going to go ahead and change your input. Well, because we don't really have that, what we're going to do is our controller controls the controls. So we're going to have our controller go ahead and free up when the player is free to play. If we open up the correct controller, should be pretty simple to add in. We already have a begin play right here. We're basically creating our HUD, updating the score to 0, and, well, we'll go ahead and get game mode, and we will begin play. And I don't think, game start, there we go. Oops. And of course that's not going to work because, well, why won't that work? Well, we don't have a way of accessing the game mode to call the game start like that. So what we need to do is probably blueprint interface would be the smart thing to do. So we'll go back to our blueprints, interface. We'll add a new one called handle game start. Of course, this is an issue you'll run into. So if you notice, I'm trying to call it handle game start, and it's going to fail. Handle game start is in use by another variable or function. Inside of our game mode, well, we already have a function called handle game start, so we're kind of can't use it. We'll cheat a little bit. We'll rename this to handle game start 2. We'll go in here. We'll rename this one to handle game start. And now we have a handle game start inside of our game mode. Go to our game mode, compile, go back to our event graph. Let's do handle game start, event handle game start. And we'll go ahead and we'll have to call this game start. Or, you know what? Let's go ahead and just kill that. We'll go back to our event graph. We'll delete the function. We'll go back to our event graph and we'll paste in what was in the function and we'll hook it up right here out in the flesh. There we go. Now we have the handle game start as an event. It'll be called and it's going to go ahead and set our input mode and our mouse cursor. We'll go ahead and run this. Assuming I set that up, I should actually probably check, huh? Nope, see, I never set it up. I was in the middle of doing things and it didn't feel right. Get the game mode, handle game start. Now it'll call the interface message to handle the game start after our game starts. So when we play here, you'll notice nothing's different than normal. We destroy some things. We have this. We hit restart game, and I'm back to normal. I can aim. Our score is reset to 0, as you can see. All of our values are set back to default on our little characters. We can shoot them. Our scores will go up. We go back to our game over screen. We can restart again, and it'll continue indefinitely. So that's it. That is going to wrap up our basic FPS prototype.